Today we cover the players that will go absolutely nuclear in fantasy football week 16. You need to make sure you have them in your starting lineup regardless of what your league size is. Make sure to stick around to the end of the video as well, because I will go over one quarterback that's only started in 43% of leagues. It needs to be 100. He is absolutely going to destroy his projections. It might be you that has him on your roster, so make sure to stick around for that. If you do appreciate this video and are feeling generous today, please go down and hit that like button. It would help me and this channel out a lot, and it'll lock in some good luck for your fantasy football playoffs to make it into that championship game. We all want that. I will never waste your time though. The first player here that is an absolute start regardless of league size is going to be Chuba Hubbard. I don't really understand how people are not realizing how truly amazing the volume that he is getting is right now. He is the RB12 in carries per game. He's the RB9 in rush yards per game. He's the RB9 in routes run per game. He's the RB5 in carries inside the 5-yard line. Almost everything is absolutely insane, and nobody gives him the credit for that. He's clearing away a workhorse running back, and now we have Jonathan Brooks out of this offense for the rest of the season, unfortunately re-tearing his ACL in week 14, so there was really zero running back competition in this backfield, which is what we love to see. Miles Sanders, he's on IR. Blackshear, he didn't see the field at all. He played 3 total snaps on the field. Now he comes into a great matchup against the Cardinals, who are 7th in points allowed to running backs this year. They just let the Patriots team as a whole go for 116 rush yards and a touchdown last week. I mean, that's the Patriots of all teams, and they let out a ton of success to them. The week before that, Zach Charbonnet had his legacy game of 134 rush yards with 2 touchdowns and over 30 fantasy points. We can keep going for every single week of football and keep seeing this success metric here. And what's been great and what's a great spot to be starting him in this matchup is that the Panthers have been extremely better since Bryce Young came back from his benching in week 8, which in turn has helped Chuba Hubbard to be that much more efficient. Since week 8, when Bryce Young came back, he's the RB3 in routes run per game. He's the RB1 in goal line attempts. This offense is just rolling with so much more consistency. It's helping everybody in this offense and to score more points. Both of these teams with the Cardinals and the Panthers don't have amazing defenses either. It is a high projected game total and a ton of scoring upside if it does happen. But speaking of that same matchup here, James Conner is going to be another nuclear running back start. I don't care how small your league is. He is going to be in there for you. Now, we get this great matchup against the Panthers. We already know this. They're allowing some of the most, if not the most, running back success on the year 2 fantasy football running backs in that specific case. They're number 2 in every single metric as far as yards allowed, yards per carry, fantasy points, allowing over 20 fantasy points per game to that position. We could keep going about these statistics. We know how good this matchup is for the Panthers, but you pair that with how good James Conner has been as of late and how he's been playing. He's seen at least 20 touches per game over his last 3 games while averaging 5.2 yards per carry in that stretch. That's number 1 amongst all running backs with that level of usage. But he's also extremely involved in the pass game, which is what we love to see and what makes these running backs so good and viable in fantasy football. He's averaging 4.75 targets per game in that 3-week stretch, as well as since his 11-week bye. That's almost 5 targets a game. That's amazing. This should be a game where the Cardinals can dominate the ground and just be able to use their running game as much as they want to. They're favored by 4.5 points. That's not an insane blowout game, but more importantly, they are projected for the 5th highest team total of the week at 26 points. They also were last week, and they put up 30 points against the Patriots, so it's pretty safe to project that they're going to be scoring a lot of points, again, giving a lot of upside to these running backs, and running backs meaning James Conner, because he is the workhorse only guy that really gets real touches here. The touchdown upside, again, is going to be there, but JSN is another player that has to be in your starting lineup. I don't care what your league looks like. He comes into this matchup against the Vikings, who are number 1 in fantasy points allowed to the wide receiver position, but it's more than just that. They're number 2 in stopping the run. Their run defense is absolutely amazing. They don't allow a lot of fantasy points, yards per carry, or just efficiency and success in general. That forces teams to play the pass. You beat the Vikings through their pass game and through exploiting their defense in the pass game. It's just what you do. So we can expect a ton of pass volume here from Geno Smith. The team is already 7th in passing attempts per game, but you look at the wide receiver competition for JSN, we still have DK. We still have Tyler Lockett. Like, these are really good wide receivers that do require a target share, but we look at the matchup specifically, and part of what you need to do when you're looking at fantasy start sits is look a little bit deeper into this stuff. Stephon Gilmore is going to be shadowing DK in this matchup, which gives JSN a ton of room to operate. So let's put this fact into a bit more perspective so you can understand what this means here. Last week, Stephon Gilmore shadowed DJ Moore, who finished with 8 receptions. Yeah, that's pretty good. Only 46 yards though, no touchdowns. That's a very good day as far as a cornerback goes for Stephon Gilmore. Then you look at Keenan Allen on the other side of the ball in the same game, 6 receptions but 82 yards and 1 touchdown. he wasn't and hadn't been shadowed by Stephon Gilmore the entirety of that game. The defensive strategy that has been used on the Seahawks all year has been to focus on DK and take him out of games, which is why he's the wide receiver 33 on the year in fantasy points, averaging 12.9 points per game. You look at JSN on the other hand, he's the wide receiver 6, averaging 15.5 fantasy points per game. It's just not even close. He's being started in less than 80% of leagues. That should easily be 100. It's an extremely pass first and positive matchup for JSN in this pass game. He runs every single route in this offense, every single snap he's on the field. He's the wide receiver 8 in total routes run per game. That's obviously going to get you a ton of upside, averaging 8.1 targets per game. Nothing is a red flag in this matchup. JSN should be in for a great one. Put him in your starting lineup. But another wide receiver here, based on matchups and based on cornerback success, Brian Thomas Jr. is going to be a guy that is a must start. And you might take this back when you look at the matchup here. They get one against the Las Vegas Raiders. It's a -1 when you look at the fantasy points allowed. The Raiders allow the 6th least amount of fantasy points to that position on the year. And he does have Mac Jones starting at quarterback. So that'll make some people hesitant to put him in their starting lineup, which is why he started in less than 70% of leagues right now. But the fantasy point numbers allowed isn't always telling you the entire picture, which is why you need to look deeper into these matchups. The Raiders are actually 28th in EPA per pass play allowed this year, and they are top 5 in wide receiver points allowed when you exclude blowouts. So all this means is that the Raiders team, their defense is absolutely terrible, and it forces teams to just stick to the ground. They don't need to pass to beat the Raiders because they're always up, they're winning, and there's no point. They stick to the run and play slow, and they can and should do that if they want to secure wins, which NFL coaches and NFL teams already know to do this, which is why they don't allow a ton of fantasy points to the wide receivers. The underlying numbers say that this is actually a very positive matchup. The cornerbacks aren't anything crazy as far as fantasy points allowed per route run. It's positive, and you look at the matchup specifically here. The Jags are projected to be very close with this Raiders team. The Raiders are projected to win this game by 1.5 points. Again, proving this is a very close game. When the Raiders are close in their games, they are allowing a ton of success to wide receiver points. Their opponent, Brian Thomas Jr., is in a great spot to dominate this week in a game that should be close, and no shortage of pass volume for Mac Jones. We can also add Brenton Strange to this part of the video as well. I have him as my tight end 8 this year. He needs to be started for this exact same reason. The Raiders are actually very positive in fantasy points allowed to tight ends. They are 4th in that aspect, and even better if you exclude those blowouts. So if you combine on average every single game that Brenton Strange has played without Evan Ingram in this lineup healthy, he's averaging 11.2 fantasy points per game on 6 targets. So if you look at 2 of those games, the only 2 out of 4 where he's played over an 80% snap share, those numbers jump up. He goes to 15.4 fantasy points per game. Strange is at a very high chance of seeing a great snap share again this week, over 80%, without Evan Ingram out for the entirety of the year. In a close, positive pass first matchup, he can also be started for you. But a quarterback that needs to be started here, that will destroy all of your projections, is going to be Baker Mayfield, who gets a primetime matchup against the Cowboys here. This guy has been ripping apart opposing defenses this year, despite not having his #1 target in Chris Godwin for the longest time. We also have Cade Otton missing this matchup here with a knee injury, but that doesn't mean we can start him in less than 40% of leagues, which is what he's at right now. The Cowboys defense has no Trayvon Diggs coming into this matchup, and they are 4th in fantasy points allowed to the quarterback position. They allow the 3rd most points to opposing offenses as a whole at 27.1, and the 7th most total yardage to offenses as a whole. All green lights for Baker Mayfield to be in your starting lineup here, and Baker has absolutely taken advantage of the defenses, the coverages, and what he's been given this year. It's all going to mix for a ton of success. He's had over 185 passing yards in 6 out of his last 9 games, so 66% of the time he's throwing for over 280 yards. Nobody is doing that. He is also top 3 in the NFL in games over 3 touchdowns per game. This is the #1 highest projected scoring game of the week as well at 49.5 points. More opportunities for touchdowns for Baker Mayfield, and what makes that even better is that the Buccaneers themselves are projected for 27 points out of those 50. That is the 4th highest team projection of the entire week, and both of these defenses are vulnerable against the pass and in the air. It should be a quick offensive dominant game for both of these teams. And a quick stat here, we also can be going through and starting Jalen McMillan if you do need that dart throw kind of flex guy, but he might not be that bad of an option as you might think. If you're ever going to start him, this is the week to do it. The Cowboys are allowing the 2nd most overall success to wide receivers in fantasy points and efficiency. Mike Evans will also have a great day. He needs to be started too, but let's not forget about the smaller slot guy in Jalen McMillan, who doesn't have to face the #1 coverage like Mike Evans is going to have to do. He actually gets the 8th best cornerback matchup of the week against Amani Oruwariye, who allows a 22.8% target per route run percentage on the year. That is good for the second best out of every single NFL corner, and he also allows a 0.38 fantasy point per route run this year. That is the fourth best out of all cornerbacks. So McMillan is a bit more of a flex play, but still the statistics show that he could be a viable option for you this week. In his last two matchups, he's averaging 4.5 receptions, 67 yards on 6.5 targets. Out of the slot, that's pretty good numbers as far as yardage per reception goes. So there is a little bit of worry again because he's not the most consistent wide receiver, but there is a lot of things pointing towards him having a good week. Again, this game total is projected to be high as well, but I do want to give you guys a list of honorable mentions. These are players that also will destroy their projections that need to be started, but they're rostered and started in over 80% of leagues, so it doesn't really make sense to put them in this video because you're not really going to be making the decision to start or sit them anyways. Here's the list of these guys. Absolutely great. You need to be starting them. I wish you all luck in this week of fantasy football. I hope you make it to the fantasy football championship, but that is going to finish off this video. Thank you guys so much for sticking around in this one. All glory to the man above.